Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We're those friends that you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility.
Hello, welcome back to the Springs in the Desert podcast. This is Cassandra. I'm here today with one of our co-founders, Anne. How you doing?
I am doing great. Always glad to be with you, Cassandra.
I know. And today, we have a very special guest today. Clare Kane, LPCA, is a psychotherapist with Harbor Light Counseling in Stamford, Connecticut. She specializes in infertility counseling and treating anxiety, depression, trauma, and PTSD. She has master's degrees in clinical mental health counseling, literature, and theology. Awesome. She lives in Richfield, Connecticut with her family. Clare, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. And Anne, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. And why don't you fill in a little bit more? I know there's a little bit more to the story with Clare. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, so Clare and I go way back to one of her master's degrees, which is in theology. She and I were classmates at the JP2 Institute in Washington, D.C. And so we've known each other for a long time. But what I think most people don't know is that Clare is actually also one of the original founding mamas of Springs in the Desert. It was Clare and I who first started this conversation about infertility and pastoral approaches. So she's actually on our founding documents. She's a silent mama. Not many people know about this. I was thinking of it today, Clare. I don't know, maybe you're like the Springs in the Desert god mama. It
Yes.
kind of feels like that. Yeah.
I pop in from time to time, and the rest of the time I'm like intercessory offside.
That's right. That's right. So it's really special for me to have you here, Clare, to be able to introduce you to this community.
Yeah. Praise God.
Yes, I'm very delighted to be asked. Thank you, ladies. I'm looking forward to this.
Great. So we're here today actually to talk about menopause, which is a topic near and I would say dear to our hearts. And it feels a little too near. But anyway, so we just want to talk a little bit about, the different experiences of menopause, break down some of those presuppositions, maybe just a lot of non-typical experiences of menopause. As someone myself who went into menopause surgically at age 29, that was not something I ever really thought about until I absolutely had to and was forced to and had that first hot flash, which we love to joke about. I told Anne I'd try to keep the menopause humor to a minimum. But you joke about it, you laugh about it, so you don't cry about it, right? Anyway, can we just talk about some of those different reasons women end up in menopause? And there's so many diagnoses. We're not just talking about older women. And what do you think?
Yeah. And of course, for me, my experience has only been seeing my mom go through menopause and other people in my family. So it was really just being part of this Springs in the Desert community and hearing other stories like yours, Cassandra, to know that this is not just something for the woman of a certain age. This is something that can be confronted for a variety of reasons. And then what does that mean spiritually and emotionally and physically when we have also had the experience of infertility or perhaps loss of pregnancy? So we just think it's really important for us to dive into this. Also, because there are people in our community who have not yet experienced menopause, but they are getting older and they're starting to feel that sort of pressure on when is it going to happen for us? Are we going to be able to get pregnant? And so I think this will be a really fruitful conversation.
Clare, how about you? What has your experience been like? You want to back up and just tell us even a little more about your story? I realize I just kind of started plowing ahead.
Oh, that's perfect. I like being direct. I love it. So one of the early conversations that Anne and I had many years ago now, decades at this point, Anne, right, is that I came to this awareness of menopause because I was diagnosed at age 13 with a condition called premature ovarian failure. I think it's now called, they changed the name a little bit, premature ovarian insufficiency, because failure sounded so final. And it's a condition that can come and go for some women, but for me, it stayed. And so I have been in and out of menopause. The only time I'm not in menopause is when I'm on medication, when I'm on hormone replacement therapy of some kind, and for the past 30 years. So it's been uncomfortably close to me. It has been my close companion for 30 years. And it's a really challenging thing. It's a challenging thing physically, mentally, cognitively. It can be challenging relationally. So yeah, I'm really glad that we're talking about this. And I think there's been this movement in the past decade or so, just even in the culture, to destigmatize these conversations about menopause. And I think it's important to talk about this juncture between menopause and infertility because it can be such a painful one for people when these two things collide. I'm glad we're talking about it for this community.
Yeah, menopause really is mysterious, even biologically and in nature. Most species do not experience menopause, but here we are, and we share that with the orcas and some other undersea.
Somebody did their research before.
I know.
I looked at some National Geographic on the headlines on the Google machine. But anyway, when it comes and you get this kind of sudden diagnosis like this, it's so shocking. And menopause to me was a side effect of cancer treatment, but it's besides the permanent surgical infertility, menopause is what I'm dealing with every day. We joke about the hot flashes, whatever. My bones are also deteriorating. And just cognitively, like you said, these kind of brain fart type things. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm 34. And it's a strange thing to be dealing with, especially I'm in a time of life where my friends are having their second kid. And it's it's strange juxtaposition for me. But anyway, in a season of infertility, we're dealing with so much stuff, right? There's just a lot. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of feelings. And we're aware of that clock, right? For most of us. So what do you ladies think are some additional thoughts and burdens that a woman who is maybe approaching menopause or in menopause or post-menopause, and those are three very different experiences in themselves, but what do you think those menopause specific burdens might look like? Claire, let's start with you.
I think some of it is this question of the narratives we've created for ourselves, right? Like if you've been in a season of infertility, right? And I'm using words here and they're very generalized, but the project of infertility, because sometimes it can feel like a project. It's like the second job, right? And it's not external to us. It's full of emotion, but it's like work, right? And then all of a sudden you're in perimenopause or you're in menopause or something happens, as you said, surgically or some sort of diagnosis. And it's like that project stops. And it's like this narrative of how I was living my days, of the hopeful narrative I have of how I might grow a family, whatever shape that was going to take, that kind of to confront the fact that's going to look different. So I think that's maybe one of the things that is menopause specific is like that clock has stopped. And what does that mean for now? And what does that mean for future? And I know you and Anne in our conversations before this podcast talked about future stuff. That's a scary thing for a lot of people who are in this, no matter the age they are when this hits, this sort of future stuff is really, I think, very menopause specific.
Yeah, I know for me, it's so interesting to think about it, isn't it? Because when you are in a season of infertility and you're trying to become pregnant, and then month after month, your period comes, and it's like a grieving process every month, right? Because, oh no, here it is again. My period came again. And you know that you have to wait now for another month to try again. But when you go into menopause, that's it. Your period doesn't come anymore. For me, anyway, there was a kind of grieving process over that too, where initially when we were going through infertility and trying, I was so sad and sometimes angry whenever my period came. And now I mourn the loss of my period because you're right, it brings that finality to it. So again, it just shows just the deep mystery of our bodies. And there's a great wonder in that, even in the sort of messiness and pain of all of it, there is a real great wonder in how we're created and the sort of cycles and seasons that our bodies go through. Not easy to see or to talk about when you're in the middle of it. And we'll probably talk a little bit more as we go on now in hindsight, the gifts and the beauty and the good things that we can see. But certainly when you're approaching it and when you're in it, it can be difficult. Claire, I think it is a kind of a grieving process, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. This is about like endings and beginnings, right? And so anytime there's that kind of transition, there's a grief of what went before, what you had hoped would go before, like the way it should have been, the way it was, and now there's this new thing here. It really is a season of grief, and I think it can also feel very isolating. I was talking with a colleague, another counselor this morning about this issue. She was, funnily enough, having a hot flash in our meeting. She's, oh my gosh, like just, I'm dying. And we were laughing about it together and commiserating, honestly. And she said, make sure in this podcast you talk about these poor husbands who like don't understand, like all of a sudden, where did my wife go? Who is this person? I don't know how to support her. because I don't know what's going on with her body. So I think that's another piece to this too, is like, it feels very isolating because now the person who was really like a companion and a helpmeet and your partner in this work of infertility, does that make sense? It's a strange way to describe it, but this person who is like carrying this cross with you, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening. How do I do this? How do I support you in this? So that's, I think, another piece that can deepen the grief sometimes, is when you feel super isolated in it.
Yeah, definitely. That isolation in the marriage and obviously the changes that we have internally when it comes to our intimate life can be a huge cross too. And especially, it wasn't necessarily my experience because, as I've talked about before, my walk, obviously I'm still walking the path of infertility, but there I had about a 3-month period that I knew something was wrong, and then it was over. And then all of a sudden you have a totally different sexual life with your husband. Your body is totally changed, at least for me, going into menopause surgically and going through the hysterectomy and bilateral oophorectomy, which is what actually puts you into menopause when you lose those ovaries. And for me, I can't have hormone replacement because my cancer was hormone driven. So there's just there's a lot of pieces and a lot that just makes it such a heavy transition in a lot of ways. And there is that finality and the loss of the cycle. I remember just at a gynecology appointment a year ago and being a part of this ministry and learning even more about the beauty of the cycle, right? And this kind of wave of people who are working to build up that appreciation, not just in regards to fertility, but just in terms of women's health, how good in good health, how good the cycle is for us. And so I asked the gynecologist, I was like, do I still somehow have a cycle inside? And she was like, no. And I was disappointed, but it was so bizarre to grow up. You have endometriosis and don't know it. Your periods are super painful. You can't plan or have fun or do things when you have them. Mine weren't so severe. Mine weren't as severe as others, but still, you're so uncomfortable. And then when all of a sudden it's gone, and honestly, I don't think about it that much. But then sometimes when I see like my sister's products are, and I'm just like this memory download. Oh my goodness, that used to be such a part of my life. And not just in terms of fertility, just in terms of what it's like to be a woman. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Cassandra, that's so true. Because I think that's the foundation of it. It's like identity.
Mm-hmm.
This is a transition kind of in identity. It's like entering a new season of being a female. And for many of us, it's like we're in the TARDIS. We're there 20, 30 years ahead. Wait, what just happened? Right? I would like to go back. And or if we have reached it naturally, if we're part of this ministry and are carrying this cross, we have reached it without the kind of fruitfulness and the way we wanted it to look before we got here. Right. So it's, oh my gosh, this is a change in identity. And that kind of grief, I feel like is often, it's not harder. You compare griefs. It's not a comparative. It's a very complicated one. It's got like a lot of moving pieces, and it's everybody's personal history, how they're coming to it.
The finality is so heavy, and it touches on so many different aspects of our life and what our future is going to look like. So I was just wondering, Claire and Anne, as a therapist and just as women who were all three kind of walking this path, what would you say to a woman who may be really struggling with that, the finality of it? At least for me, it's not going to happen. My husband and I are never going to have children. And it's always going to be just really sad. But there are also these ways in which it is strangely freeing to know that it's never going to happen, that we don't have to be hanging by a thread. And I've said before that, at least for me, I feel like God was merciful with me and just taking it off the table, because I see what other people go through, and every month is so hard. And I don't know, there are silver linings, right? There are new horizons, which is the language we use in this ministry when we talk about the path of infertility. You're setting out on the path, you are on the path in the thick of it, and then maybe you reach menopause or have a definitive diagnosis, and you are moving on. And I know that there are people listening to this that probably feel like there is no moving on, that there is never going to be moving on. I would just ask you to share your wisdom. What would you say to those women?
And do you want to go first?
No, I was going to defer to the professional, but I would just say that I agree with what you were saying, Cassandra, about that freedom. For me, and we talk about this in many aspects of this ministry, in many different circumstances, it's so important, I think, to speak out the fears, the anger, the frustration, the confusion, the wondering. What does this mean? What now? Who am I as a woman? What does my marriage look like? It's so important for us to just acknowledge that and speak it out. Even if we feel silly saying it, or we think, oh my gosh, sometimes we'll think I shouldn't think that, or I shouldn't have that feeling. We have to speak it and get it out so that we can see it for what it is, acknowledge it, and then look for how we can move forward. Like how is God continuing to work with us and work on us, and where is he taking it? Because even though there's a finality, so to speak, with menopause, for us, the infinite God, he's way bigger. There's no finality with him. He is not done with us. Our purpose has not been completely fulfilled. He's got so much to do with us and with our marriages. I think being able to grieve, to allow ourselves to feel those emotions and go through that process is really important. And then we can begin to look back and we can see, oh, okay, here's where there is some freedom, or here's where I can see a gift even in the middle of this suffering. So I don't know, Claire, if you have any thoughts on that too.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful because, I think the finality of this in a weird way, I love that you said that, Cassandra, and you talked about that too. And it's the freedom, right? And as we were talking about this, that I think I can really only speak to my experience. My condition is a condition, even though it was very clear from the time I was about 15, like this is not reversing. Some women come out of it for 1 month and then go back in. It's very mysterious. Mine, it was like, not happening. I literally had an OBGYN be like, you're going to get somebody canonized, like literally raised to the altar if you ever get pregnant. I was like, wow, that is very blunt. Thank you. He's a wonderful Catholic physician. But I'm like, oh my gosh, really, that was a little harsh, sir. But it was also very helpful because I think finality does give us a sense of sometimes in infertility, when you are living this day to day, month to month, cycle to cycle, you are living the Paschal mystery every 30 days, right? Like hope, building, growing, the crucifixion, the burial. Okay, the resurrection, let's hope, build it. It can be exhausting. It's this cumulative building, ambiguous grief. There is that desire for children, right? That intense desire, like to have fruitfulness take the shape of children of our bodies. I also think sometimes we can somehow acquire unconsciously. It's not just a desire, it's a should. I have to do this. I should be pursuing this. I should be like charting. I should be doing all these things. I should be looking up the diets. I should be doing everything possible I can, twisting myself into a pretzel sometimes. And the finality of menopause, basically the segue for many women will be a segue through many perimenopause, is I can put down this sword. In fact, the invitation here is to put down the sword. And there is a sadness in that, right? There's a sadness, a huge sadness. But there is also a fair amount, there was for me, of relief. Because, okay, I do not have to make this happen. Because I think a lot underneath this, right? Underneath this, unconsciously, I think a lot of women, a lot of men are like, I have to make it happen. And we know intellectually, objectively, like that's not what's happening. But I think our hearts get very tied to that idea. So for me, that finality was really freeing. I will say something. There's a great TED talk about grief. I forget the lady who did it. She is a widow. She lost her husband very young. And she talks about how much she hates the phrase moving on. She said, moving on, we got to be careful with our prepositions, right? Which makes me think of all of our classes at the JP2, and right, be careful with those prepositions, right? But she said, moving forward is maybe a better phrasing, because I will always carry with me the sadness that I didn't have children of my body. I'll carry that with me. But I'm also carrying this great like hope and the fulfillment of like lots of longings that the Lord has taken in like shapes I could not imagine. I could not have imagined the way my life would have looked, the way he'd make things fruitful 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago in that doctor's office. So I don't know if that's an answer or speaking to this, but that something about that finality is also like an invitation to hope
There is so much the Lord has for us to do, and there is so much that he has left for us to do. We are here for a reason, and it sounds very trite in a way, like kind of Hallmark card for infertility. You're here for a reason, but we are. And he's giving us so many opportunities and so many invitations, and those are going to look different no matter the season of life. Right now, for me, at least as far as menopause goes, it looks like making sure I get to the gym and maybe trying a little harder to do weight bearing exercises, maybe trying a little harder to actually take the supplements I'm supposed to and take care of myself, because at 34, I hope to have these bones for a while yet, but only he knows. But yeah, he has so much to give us. It's not always going to be what we would have desired or come on the timeline that we would have liked. But yeah, we just have to keep walking.
Yeah, and Claire, gosh, the time is flying. We're going to have to wrap up soon. We're going to actually have to have you back because this is a great conversation. But before we do, I wondered if you could go back and touch on something you mentioned earlier in our conversation, which was about our husbands and how the ways that they almost have to learn to grieve along with us and walk with us through infertility, it also including their own grief and feelings that they're going through. It's not just about what they think about us, but they have their own grief and so forth that they go through. But then you talked about transitioning into this kind of a season of menopause. I wondered if you could touch on that a little bit and just maybe give our listeners, and this applies to whether you're in menopause or just generally in a season of infertility, what are some ways that we as husbands and wives can just nurture and love each other, whether it's a season of infertility or entering into a new horizon in our lives together?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think it really stems on communication, going back to the basics. I think one of the things that often happens, one of the blessings that can come from having to carry this cross of infertility, is that there often has to be more communication about the nitty gritty of bodies, about reproductive health for both men and for women. And that can become more a normalized part of a marriage conversation. Frequently it isn't. I counsel a lot of couples for whom infertility is not an issue. And it's, oh my gosh, these people don't talk about anything, right? Like, what are they doing with their time when they spend time together, right? But I think learning about, literally Googling, what does menopause look like for women, right? That could be something a guy can do and be like, hey, how can I support you? You having a hot flash? Do you want me to get you an ice pack? Those little sort of acts of service. Do you need a hug right now? Do you need 15 minutes alone? Right? That kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Do you need a girls' night? Do you need me to vacate this space? Literally, what do you need? And then being responsive in that moment. I just need a hug. I just need 5 minutes to myself. And then also being communicative, saying, I think this is something I would like to talk about, from women to men, right? Like, I would like to talk about this, how this is affecting our sex life, right? That's a big thing. I know we touched on it briefly and a bit obliquely, but that's a big issue. It's a very big issue. Intimacy is a huge part of marriage. And there is this interesting transition that happens in menopause where, shall we say, the unitive versus the procreative kind of takes ascendance, right? And that is a beautiful thing. There is an invitation there, right? So that's something to be talked about. Okay, how can we love each other more lovingly, tenderly in this time, both in terms of physical intimacy, but also just like togetherness, right? There's often more space and time for togetherness. So how to build that enjoyment of each other, I think, is really crucial. And conversation is usually the way that starts. And also play. That's the other thing too. A lot of couples forget play. And I'm not necessarily talking about like intimate play. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about things like seeing movies together, going to concerts together, hanging with friends, having game nights, like incorporating like lighthearted, really interactions together, that it's not also serious, because that can also happen. I think that can become part of the wear and tear of carrying the cross of infertility, is that every interaction becomes serious.
And such a great point too. And just for me, I can imagine how much I'm not a spontaneous person, but how much less of a spontaneous person I would be if I still had a cycle, honestly, because then you just can't. I just couldn't get it. Just go and do something all the time, depending on what that thing was. Is there going to be a bathroom there? So just, I don't know, just a small gift, one of those other silver linings. And yeah, ways that we can walk forward on this path together with our spouse and in this community. So, Claire, thank you so much for your time today. Why don't you tell our listeners how they can find out more about you and your practice and where you're licensed? Because there's such a need for good therapists, for good spiritual directors too, who understand this cross, and there's such a need. Why don't you tell us where we can find you?
Oh, thanks so much. So I am licensed in the state of Connecticut, and I see clients at a wonderful practice called Harbor Light Counseling. We actually have a special sort of division within Harbor Light Counseling, special program called Hopeful Pathways Infertility Counseling. So I do telehealth counseling for individuals, couples, and for groups of women. Please, we're here. We really want to provide this service because there is not a lot out there. And we really want to, as myself and my boss and all the members of our team are small but very tight-knit, we really want to be of service to this community.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
My
And
pleasure.
we will link to that in the show notes, and her practice is also linked on our website, springsinthedesert.org/links. You can find that anytime. Claire, thank you so much. And thank you. And we will see you next time on the Springs in the Desert podcast. God bless.
Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. We would be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review us so that we can reach more listeners. Don't forget to check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and community prayer list, read our blog, and register for virtual and in-person events. Most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.